From Community Public Radio, this is the CPR News. From New York, I'm Don DeBar. Today we go to Nicaragua to speak with Steve Sefton, the journalist that we speak with on a regular about events south of the border. And it's a big day in Honduras today. A new president, one might say a reversal of the coup that took place during the Obama administration when Mel Zelaya was dragged out of the presidential palace and a right-wing terror reign more or less gripped the country from then until last year, really. And the right has not given up the reins of power very easily. That much bragged about peaceful transfer of power that they seem to worship in the United States doesn't really matter when U.S. puppets are being pushed out of the government by elections. So let's talk about some of that with Stephen. Stephen, first of all, welcome.
Thanks a million, Don. Thanks for having me back on your program. So, yeah, and that is a very big event here in Central America, the presidential inauguration of the first woman president of Honduras, Xiomara Castro, who's the wife of former President Mel Zelaya, who, as you pointed out, was ousted in a military coup in 2009.
Yep.
And I'm especially pleased and interested in what's happening today because I have strong associations with Honduras, and I was actually in Honduras on the day of the coup, 28th, 29th of June in 2009. So I take great personal satisfaction in seeing that Mel Zelaya's wife, Xiomara Castro, has now become Honduras's first woman president.
There's quite a body count, wasn't there, by the way? I just wanted to, in the aftermath of that coup, there was a body count, including some people that you knew, right?
All right, yeah, and that's, and hundreds of people were killed in the years following the coup by the United States sanctioned the interim government under a guy called Micheletti, and then Porfirio Lobo's government that took office after the elections that were hardly free and fair in the circumstances at the end of 2009, and then Juan Orlando Hernandez took power subsequent to Porfirio Lobo. And so you've had a series of right-wing US-backed regimes, essentially narcotics regimes, because Honduras immediately turned into a haven for narcotics trafficking with the collusion of high-level officers of the army and the police,
right.
and of course with the collusion of the government. So throughout that period, the neoliberal policies were implemented in an extremely aggressive way. And in order to make that possible against the strong popular resistance that grew up and happened against those policies, they had to kill people, not at the same rate as happens in Colombia, but they were advised by Colombians, and they applied a similar policy, so that people like Berta Cáceres, for example, who was trying to defend the natural resources and the environmental stability of the area where she lived in the west of Honduras, the Garifuna people up along the northern and northeastern Caribbean coast of Honduras, they also have suffered terribly under this neoliberal regime, aggressively handing over parts of Honduran territory to foreign investors and foreign interests, corporate interests. And my beloved friend Margarita Murillo was playing a similar role in the area around San Pedro Sula, and like Berta, she was murdered, like so many others.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that the whole Black Lives Matter campaign in the United States seems to have left out what's happening in the United States in effect colonies.
Right.
Four Garifuna activists were disappeared. I think I'm not sure, can't remember if it's 4 or 5, certainly 4 were disappeared in July last year, and nothing's happened about it.
Let me just say on the numbers, when you're comparing Honduras to Colombia, by the way, most people here probably don't know off the top of their head, there's about 5 times the population in Colombia that there is in Honduras. Honduras is just under 10 million people maybe in the last census, and Colombia is just shy of 50 million. So, on scale, perhaps it might actually be as many.
Yeah. That's a very important point. You're right, Don. So and the similar levels and similar styles of repression were applied in Honduras following 2009, and so the hope and essentially after 13 years of that, that's why Xiomara Castro was able to win such a categorical electoral victory last November, at the end of November. Right. And I think she won with a margin of over 10% against the other candidate, Juan Orlando Hernandez's.
Yeah, it was a good spread.
Candidate.
Yeah.
And so, and in that context, in the context of the Honduran electoral system, that was a huge win. So anyway, and the point about it is that, so it has that regional significance and national significance for Honduras, and in regional terms, it means that you have a social democrat style. And I think it would be wrong to categorize Xiomara Castro as a kind of a strongly radical figure. And what she's going to do is to try and install what most countries take for granted. A national health system, an adequate education system that have been completely cut away and practically destroyed by the neoliberal governments that have been in office in 2009. And one of the main policy platforms or programs that she has had is to reverse the kind of wholesale privatization and actual selling off of national territory and the so-called ZEDES program, the Exclusive Economic and Development Zones program that was instituted by Juan Orlando Hernandez, which in effect sell off chunks of Honduran territory to foreign corporations to run as they please.
Right. We won't regulate this and we won't tax this and all of this. So here's a gift. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's that kind of thing that we can expect Xiomara Castro. The worst excesses of neoliberal policy in Honduras are likely to be completely reversed. But she's going to have a very hard time at a national level. And we saw the extent to which the local oligarchy, backed up by the United States without any doubt at all, we saw the extent to which they're prepared to go when last week, in a ceremony prior to today's presidential inauguration, the executive board of the National Assembly, the legislature, was voted on, and to everybody's consternation and surprise, a group of around 20 of Xiomara Castro's Libre Party deputies who'd been voted, who ran on Libre's ticket.
They got elected because they ran with her.
They ran with her, right. But they voted. They engaged in a ceremony to back the candidate of Juan Orlando Hernandez and his party for the president of the National Assembly, and what that in effect meant was that Xiomara Castro's block of 50 deputies overnight was reduced to just over 30, and her party expelled 18 of those 20 deputies that took part in that ceremony to elect a right-wing executive of the National Assembly against what had been previously agreed by the whole party. And what then happened was that there was a massive popular mobilization in Honduras to essentially occupy the whole precinct of the National Congress,
Right.
which is the legislature there.
Right.
And that popular mobilization prevented the right-wing board from actually entering the National Congress, and they had to go and hold their ceremony in a private function center
In a motel room.
about 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers outside the capital, Tegucigalpa. So
Let me decode this for a minute.
We still haven't reached the denouement of that, because Xiomara Castro took the extraordinary step, an extraordinarily bold step on her part, of offering to the guy, the principal leader of the dissident group in her party that betrayed her, she's made him an offer to be her kind of her program coordinator in her government's cabinet, and so she's offered him this olive branch, in the hope that he will accept that, and thus accept the legitimately agreed board of the National Congress that was voted in by the Libre Party and its allies, subsequent to the right wing internal coup inside the legislature. So we won't know until later on today whether that's happened or not. But that's just an indication of what the right wing oligarchy is capable of doing, because they just bought off all those Libre deputies. They just bought them off.
Right.
And so that gives you some idea of the huge resistance that the local oligarchy is going to put up to the changes.
They've started already. Yep. Yeah.
Xiomara is going to try and introduce into the Honduran economy and into Honduran society in general, because things have shifted so far to the extreme right in terms of economic policy, social policy, the kind of neo-colonial domination of foreign corporations, the continuing military presence of the United States, where in Honduras, where they have one of their biggest regional bases, Soto Cano, the air base that used to be known as Palmarola. That was a central feature of the Contra War against Nicaragua, and also the campaign against the FMLN guerrillas in El Salvador, and also the URNG guerrillas in Guatemala all through the 1980s. And subsequently, that base has become it's kind of like a branch of the Southern Command stuck right in the heart of Central America. And so all those things I've just been talking about are things that Xiomara is going to have to be finding ways to kind of defuse, neutralize, and just so as to begin to be able to implement her program.
So,
and
go
ahead. Sorry, Don.
Yeah, go ahead. I just want to, before we get too far into it, I just want to decode the very beginning of this so people understand clearly because not everybody here really knows the history. You have Mel Zelaya, elected president, takes office in January of 2006, okay? And in June of 2009, 6 months into the Obama administration, there's a coup d'etat there that puts right-wing death squads in charge of the country, in essence. There is an election held by the general dictator, the appointed person to administer They hold an election. The right wing predictably wins after several people who were organizers and key people are killed and many more arrested before the election. There's a popular unrest already in response to that. At the next election, there is a very big vote, regardless of the machinations pulled by these people, for the opposition, the left opposition, the center opposition, even if you want to be accurate. And then a lot of popular activity because people saw or felt that the entire thing was stolen. And so you've gone through like this rise of people against the coup that culminates in this election of not just Xiomara Castro, but of her slate that puts a majority in control of the National Assembly. As they come into power and as they're being inaugurated and having ceremonies and taking oaths, 20 of the 50 defect in a coordinated action to the right wing. They're elected to undo the coup that took place in 2009, and as they take office, they step back to hand power back to the people who are the children of the coup, basically. That's what we just saw happen, and in response to that, forget if it sounds a little like January 6th to some people, they take over the National Assembly, forcing these people to meet in some back room somewhere to finish their ceremonies. That's pretty much what just happened, right?
Yeah, that's a very accurate description of what happened. So, and I think you're right when you say that really the election wasn't so much an election for a progressive government as such. It was very much a reaction against the coup, and even in a context in which even centrist social democrat policies are seen as radical.
Right.
And so if you look at, so there's that, in that sense, it's the conflict is over. Will Honduras be able to go through a process of national renewal or not? And how far will it be held back by the dead hand of the narco-terror regime that ran the country from 2009 onwards, with the full support of the United States?
Right.
You know,
yep.
You can make some observations about that, but that was essentially what happened. So in that context, it's very interesting to see how regional centrist politicians, essentially social democrat politicians, are coming to support. They're participating in this presidential inauguration. You have people like Gabriel Boric from Chile participating. Cristina Fernandez, the Argentinian vice president, right, is going to participate. Evo Morales from Bolivia is going to be there. And so you have kind of what many people, liberals in the West would regard as progressive forces participating in this activity. But the irony from the point of view of us here in Nicaragua and people in Venezuela and people in Cuba is that although Nicaragua is sending a high-level delegation, Daniel Ortega isn't going to go, nor is Nicolas Maduro going to go. Yeah. And I haven't seen any news of a representation from Cuba, but it was precisely those three countries, right, that were the countries that gave unconditional political support to Mel Zelaya and Xiomara Castro, right, in the wake of the coup.
Oh, for sure. I mean, look, Daniel Ortega let him take his place on the stage at, what was it, OAS or CLAC? CLAC, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Mel Zelaya. And that's just interesting. And I think it's an expression of the way in which, in my view of the way the overall policy in the region is happening, is that what you have is a strong rearguard action from the local oligarchies, determined to defend their interests. And they're backed up to some extent by that in the United States. But because of the increasing influence of China in the region, local elites are torn between needing to engage with this Chinese influence in order to be able to take advantage of the huge economic and commercial opportunities that growing Chinese influence has in the region. And on the part of the United States, and the United States is essentially reduced to taking actions to spoil and prevent the development of progressive movements and the coming to power of progressive governments. And as we can see here in Honduras, if a progressive government does take power, the United States and its local allies will combine to prevent them from being able to implement their policies as freely as they otherwise would be able to. Yeah. And this is very clear in the case of President Castillo in Peru, for example. It's also clear, it will become clear in the case of Gabriel Boric in Chile, and it's also true in Argentina, where the dead hand of the IMF that engaged in what are essentially illegal loans, huge, unprecedented loans to the previous government of Mauricio Macri. The IMF and the United States, through the IMF, is using that huge indebtedness that Macri deliberately created to essentially destroy his own country's economy, while making sure that he and his clique were able to take advantage of it.
Right, Argentina gets a bunch of debt and he walks off with the money. That's basically how those deals work.
His clique.
That's what I'm saying. He and his boys.
Colleagues, essentially.
Colleagues.
So then, what does all that mean? And if you look at what's happening in Honduras today, you can see all of that happening, and it's symbolically in terms of the people who are arriving to participate and the ones who aren't. Yeah. And among the delegations that will be arriving, for example, are Felipe VI, the King of Spain, and also a big delegation from the United States led by Vice President Kamala Harris. Yeah. But as well as Kamala Harris, if you look at the composition of that delegation, it also includes Samantha Power, who's the current director of USAID, but much more notorious for her monstrous role as the representative of the United States in the United Nations during a period when the United States was engaging in wholesale destructive interventions around the world, from Libya to Syria.
Yemen, etc.
No, it's betrayal of its obligations under the nuclear agreement with Iran, and so on and so on and so on, and just endless interventions. And Samantha Power was the public face of all that, along with Susan Rice and others. Yeah. And so, the fact that she is going to Honduras just makes me remember what happened back in 2006. Not 2006, it was 2007, I think, when Mel Zelaya went to the United States and met with then President George W. Bush. And his visit was essentially to ask the United States to mobilize greater resources to facilitate the Honduras social and economic development in Honduras. That was the essential request that Mel Zelaya was making at the time to the United States. And of course, George W. Bush told him to drop dead. That there was nothing on top of the then existing neoliberal aid commitments that the United States was prepared to make. So Mel Zelaya took that, went back to Honduras, went to Caracas, and joined ALBA, the Venezuelan and Cuban-driven initiative based on solidarity-style commercial relations and development cooperation. And with the support of ALBA, he was able to begin to do the things that the United States had told him they weren't willing to help him do, and essentially democratize the Honduran economy, improve its education system, improve its healthcare system, none of which was to the liking of the United States
or the oligarchs.
That was why, or the local oligarchy that was used to milking state resources for their own personal use and their own personal profit. And so that was why the coup in Honduras happened in 2009. So why is Samantha Power and such a notorious figure from U.S. foreign policy over the last decade arriving in Honduras for the presidential inauguration with the Vice President of the United States? And essentially, I think what they're sending is a message to Xiomara Castro that they're willing now, under the very different circumstances that prevail in the region, to engage with Honduras in a much more supportive way than they were prepared to do back in 2007.
They're not sending a message, they're delivering a message. Samantha Power is an actual player. Kamala Harris might be carrying a message, but Samantha Power, it's her messages and her colleagues.
Yeah, and it's a kind of that's my interpretation of it. But we have to bear in mind that, and as you say, and Kamala Harris is in many ways a lightweight compared to Samantha Power, and certainly in foreign policy terms. And so, while, as you say, Kamala Harris may be the person visibly symbolizing the promise of more support from the United States, Samantha Power, the message from Samantha Power will be, do what we want or else. And that's I have no doubt about that.
Let me ask you a question.
Sorry?
Let me ask you a question. Just in terms of, because we're talking about the symbology of who's attending, the inauguration today. So, that Samantha Power is coming. Southcom is still there, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Southcom is still there. You have had, in the last few days...
In fact, the delegation, sorry, Don, the delegation from the U.S. didn't land at Tegucigalpa's airport.
Right. They
landed in the U.S. military base at Soto Cano.
Airstrip, right. Okay, so, and that's where they're holed up. You have, just this past week, an attempted right-wing coup again. And in fact, partially accomplished. And now, okay, so I am Daniel Ortega. I'm President Diaz-Canal. I am Nicolas Maduro. Let's all go to this one place where we have no idea what the reliability of the military is going to be, where you've got top brass, basically, with a figurehead vice president and a Samantha actual power on site. Would you want to walk into that room and have this? All those high value targets in one place with that configuration of forces? They'd be insane to all gather there.
Yeah, and you're right. And there's the flip side of that is that the United States wouldn't have even turned up if there'd been any prospect at all of Nicolas Maduro or Miguel Diaz-Canel or Daniel Ortega being present at that presidential inauguration. So, and what that seems to be, in my opinion, is confirmation that Xiomara Castro's overall position and the way she's going to position Honduras in foreign policy terms in the current regional context is she's going to lean towards the kind of central social democrat style,
right,
of Alberto Fernandez, of AMLO,
right.
And it's telling that the foreign minister, Mexico's foreign minister, Marcelo Ebrard, who's a complete neoliberal, and he is from our point of view, he has an extremely negative effect on Mexico's foreign policy, and
That's the
fact
array.
that
I
people-
understand. That's the array. We're completely out of time, so we're going to stop. And we'll pick this up next week because we didn't get out of Honduras. And let's see what happens today. That'll be our starting point next week. Thank you for enlightening us.
Tom, I'm sorry we ran over time.
No problem. Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate it. And that's all the news we have for you right now. For Community Public Radio, I'm Don DeBar in New York. Thanks for listening.